Hello everyone, welcome back to the third part of our tutorial concerning Roam database. If you haven't seen the previous videos, no worries, you can still be able to follow with us regardless of what we have done before. I will explain everything with a generic manners anyway. So the third section of this tutorial, it will be concerning auto migration or migration in general. So whenever you make a change to your database schema instance, for instance, adding a field or updating a field in your entity, or deleting a field from your entity or a data table, you have to increment the database version here from 1 to 2. So this is what we call migrating from the old schema to the new schema. So in order to allow your project to export schema, so go to the build.gradle file and under defaults configuration, add this line of code. It will allow the schema to be exported. And I'm going to add another line of code as well in order to add the schema in the assets folder. So before build types, add this line of code. It will add the schema to this asset folder here in the after compiling your project. So this is basically how to and of course inside the Roam database class you have to put here to export your schema, but by default it's true, so you don't have to worry about this. So I'm going to sync our projects and we're going to wait. So this is the first part of what we will do. Now we're going to put some actions to our application. Let's go to the Roam repository and let's start implementing some of these functionalities. But first, we have to go to the app module and we need here to add a few, just how to provide the instance of our database. So it will be useful for you for other cases in your future application. So it will be called provides, not Roam database, but it's going to be provides database. All right. And it will take in parameter an application context. No, it's just an application, but it's not an application context. It's going to be application of type application. And it will give us as a return type product of database. So this is just beyond the scope of our tutorial, and I think it's provide here, and I will put the rest of the code here. So it will return. So we are doing this in order to use the database in our repository. So Roam.database builder, and here it's gonna be for the context it will be the application, and for the name of the database it will be product. Not the name of the database, but the class of the database is going to be product database class.java. And for the name of the database, it's going to be product database. And here I'm going to add fallback to destructive migration. So in the documentation, this method allows Roam to destructively recreate database tables if migrations that would migrate all database schemas to the last schema version are not found. So this method basically will we have two cases. If the version of the database match the schema of the database, it will run the necessary migrations. Otherwise, it will make the version of the database at the current version, and it will throw illegal state exception. We will call here finally build. And here in this Roam repository, we will inject, so private val database, or let's call it DB. I'm not gonna, so it's gonna be database, product database. And here we will put our DAOs. So those are basically the DAOs that we have. Now let's implement this Roam repository. So what we need here basically, let's see the first method. It will clear user and bio. So we will do here user repository or user DAO. That's where is delete all, and that's it. And automatically it will delete all the user related bios. Of course, we're going to add another method that's going to clear for us all the data. I'm just gonna change here clear necessary product DAO that delete all. So and medias, and we will delete the wishlist DAO again, delete all wishlists. Nice. Now let's go to the seed. So the method seed is going just to feed our data application with data or our database with data. So it's gonna be pretty simple. So let's implement the add or replace a user. So basically it will return, it will, of course, this method, it will raise an exception. So I'm going to catch this exception. So we need to return a long. So we will call user DAO that insert user, and the user will be given by a user entity. And that's pretty much it, because this method is going to return the inserted user ID. Otherwise, if there is a problem, it will return for us minus one. Add or update bio with the same thing. The other function, add to wishlist. So here we're going to add a record to our wishlist. Here I'm going to put val user. It will be, let's check if we have at least one registered user in our application. So if it's not null, I'm going to use elevate operator. It will return -1 if there is no registered user. It will be, or the interested wishlist ID, it will be the wishlist DAO that insert or add to wishlist. And wishlist, it's called, of course, it's gonna be just a wish and wishlist entity. If we have an active user, we will get its ID and we will continue the rest. Otherwise, we cannot add a wishlist if we don't have any active user in our application. So this is basically the algorithm. So it's gonna be wishlist DAO dot insert. I think we have added here insert products cross-reference. Yes. Let's reformat the code. How to get the products from the using the DAO. So it's gonna be products DAO, and it will be get products. So now we have list of products with medias. So, but now we need to cast it to products. So how to do that? We are going to do it with the power of the flow, because flow has the advantage of manipulating or changing the data, casting, filtering, you name it. So here I'm going to add map, and it that map each flow. Let's call it here products with medias. And here I'm going to do products with medias to products. Great. So we do the same thing for get wishlist. I'm going to remove here empty flow, and I will return a flow. I'm going to construct a new flow. So if we have an active user, which means that I'm going to call the check method, that's first. And if user equal null, so there is no active user, what we will do, we will emit a new data. So we'll emit a new empty list. So there is nothing to show to the user. Otherwise, so here I'm going to add some curly braces. Otherwise, what we will do wishlist DAO that get all wishlist detail by that user ID, or here it has to be user ID. I don't know why. User ID, user dot ID, and we will collect, of course, inside the flow. Here I'm going just to do collect, and I'm going to emit here the collected data to the new constructed flow. So, but not directly. I'm going to because here, as you see here, we have collecting the wish list with products and medias. Now we're going to cast it to wish lists. I think we are shadowing it from somewhere else. Oh yes. Here I'm going to remove this because it's going to be confusing at this point. So it will be wish list products and media, and wish list products and medias that to wish list. Get to wish list. We have 2 or 3 other functions to implement. So is active user, it's going to give us, of course, a flow again. It will return a flow. It will return, here I'm going to construct a new flow. So user dot check user. So I'm going to check if we have an active user or not with a real feedback from the database. That's why I'm using flow, because you're going to see when running the application, whenever we delete a user, or once we are going to register in the application, we will see the update automatically in the composable. So we will collect, and we're going to emit the value. So the value, it will be it not equal to null. So I'm going to reformat the code. So basically, if the collected data is not null, we will emit the value. So it's going to be whether true or false. So the get last user, so simple. It will be just user DAO get last user, and we will map it to, of course, it's going to be null, and to last detail, to user detail. So deleting a wish list is fairly straightforward. So wishlist dot delete wishlist by the given ID equal ID. So we are now done implementing the room repository. Now let's try the application. Now we have to move to the view model. So I'm just doing that. Imagine that you have some data from the API and you're trying to deal with this with the clean architecture way. So this is the point. Even the clean architecture is not the focus of our tutorial. So here I'm going to comment this delay, and I'm going to try to seed the application with data and see what's going to happen. All right. So the application is being installed in my device. So nothing fancy. It's a splash screen. Now we must have the product. Great. So we do have the product, and let's come back to the main view model, and let's comment this seed. I will just put a delay of 3 seconds. And if we click on the wish list, we don't have any wishes because we don't have any active user. And let's add, for example, let's click here, add the user. Let's do, for example, here some Jack something. Let's do I don't know, 30. I don't know, just some random name, and an email. It's gonna be Jack or at gmail.com. Next, address, some address. And for the phone number, it's going to be just a random phone number. I just add some primitive form validation. So I'm going to hit save. Great. User is saved successfully. And if you have noticed, we have in the real time the change that we have now, an active user. So we have here the active user, and if we click again to that active user, we will change, for example, its name, and it's going to be reflected in real time. So save, and that's pretty much it. If we come back to that form, we will have the result, the data with that result. So that's good. Now let's check the wish lists. So now I'm going to just do an overview of the application. So let's check the wish list and let's add a product to wish list. So add to wish list. The product is added to wish list. Let's add, for example, this one. And let's add this one. And let's add this one. Great. Now I didn't implement the other one, how to organize your wish list. We are going to do it the other way. So here we have the list of wish lists, but this is not the desired result. So I'm going to relaunch the application. I'm going to connect the application with the USB so we can change the data from the app inspector. So hold on a minute. So if you have noticed any bugs, it's beyond the scope of this tutorial. So this is just a starting point of this application. So great. Now we must have all the data that we have saved before. And let's go to the app inspector. It will load the data from the device, and we will manipulate the wish list in order to make them grouped in, let's say, 2 or 3 wish lists. I'm going just to make it 2. Okay, just hold on a minute. So it's connecting with the database. So those are basically the data table that we have in our database. So in order to simulate what I want to achieve here in this application, I'm going to go to the product wish list reference, and I will change from 1 here. I'm going to add 1. Just pay attention to the application. It's moved to that wish list. I'm going to, instead of 3 here, I'm going to add another 1 here. So it's going to be for that wish list. And I'm going to remove this from the wish list. And we have stuck, for example, the wish list title 1 with 3 products, and wish list title 4 with 3 products. So now that we made sure that our application working perfectly fine, let's add some migration, or let's add some changes to our database. So the first primitive way to do it is, sorry for the term, but is to increment the version. So let's say in the wishlist entity, let's add a new field here. Let's call it title, type string. So now we have added the title as a new field in our entity, wishlist entity. In order to reflect those changes, first of all, I have to add a column name here. It's not for the purpose of the column name, but it's going to be for the default value. It will be null, because otherwise it's going to give us an error, and we will come back here. So now let's see what's going to happen. I'm going to run the application, and let's see what's the error that's going to give us. Of course, I have to specify the targets. Here is going to be my tablet as well. And let's run the application, and let's see what's going to happen. It's going to give us an error because we have added a new field without incrementing the version of our database. So, of course, we need to add here a value of, see here, title, wishlist title here. So the error here is Room cannot verify the data integrity. Looks like you have changed schema but forgot to update the version number. You can simply fix this by increasing the version number. So this is the first method. So when we are doing this, we will have to increment the version with 2. Great. The second use case, let's assume that you would like to rename a field or delete an entire table, or deleting a column. So in this case, so you have first of all to increase the version of the database, and here we're going to add a new parameter. It's called auto migration, and here we'll specify the migration that it will take place. So we're going to declare it afterwards. Now we want, for example, to rename the field. Let's go to the user entity. We want, for example, to rename this field from full name to first and last name. So it's going to be first and last name. And the default value, of course, it has to be always empty string. And here I'm going to do first and last name. So we now have to, of course, go back to the products database, increased the version from 2 to 3, but this is not enough. Now what we have to do, we have to specify the migration specs. So I'm going to go to the package database here. I'm going to create a new data class or a class. It's going to be, let's call it just simply migration from version 2 to 3. It will be just a normal class. So here I'm going to put the specification of this migration. So the specification of this migration, in our case, we have renamed the field from full name to first and last name. In case you want, for example, to delete a colon, you have to do delete colon followed by the specification. If you want to delete, for example, a table, you need to do delete table followed by specification. In our case, I'm going to do rename colon followed by the specification. So the table name that we have changed is users table, and we have to specify from the column name. We have changed from the column name full name to the column name first last name, or first and last name, I think. Let's come back here, first and last name. And this class should inherit from auto migration spec. And let's come back to the products database. And here I'm going to put auto migration from the version 2 to version 3, and for the migration specs, migration from 2 to 3 class. So this is how to do it. And one thing before doing that, we're going to check the exported schema. I think it's going to be under assets. Yes. So the under assets has been done with this source set instruction, and for the capped arguments, blah blah blah, it's gonna be done. It's exported with project source file, and it's gonna be here under schemas, and this are basically the first version. So I'm going just to come back here in the assets folder, and here, where is the assets folder? Yeah. So the first version, this is the schema of the first version that's been exported. We have made the change for the first version, I think, products ID user. So this is the first schema. The second schema, so we have added here the field, as I said before. So for the first schema, there is no change. For the second schema, we have added a field called title. So it has to be shown here. Where is the, there you go. So the field title has been added. Now we are on the third migration, which means we have migrated from the version 2 to version 3. And basically, instead of full name, it will be first and last name. So let's run again the application and let's see what's going to happen. It has already exported for us the migration or the schema, the new schema. Let's see, let's check the user entity, we have the ID, we have the email, and we have first and last name. So basically it changed from the migrated from the 2 to 3. So for the third use case, sometimes you would like to add a new table to your database. In this case, auto migration, as we did before from 2 to 3, won't work. It will raise an exception. So we have to proceed with a manual migration. So first of all, let's create a new table. I'm going to call it, for example, bookmarks. So let's assume that we want to add this data table. So let's go back to the product data table and let's add that data table or this entity here. We don't need actually to create for it a DAO for that matter, because we're not going to use it. We're going just to see what's the error or how to prevent the error from happening during migration. So here I'm going to do bookmark entity class. We have now to increment this from version 2 to version 4. We need to create a new class here in the database, and we're going to use it, name it, migration. You can name it whatever you want. Migration from 3 to 4. Let's remove this. And of course, it's not gonna be a class, but it's gonna be just an object. We don't need a class actually. So it's gonna be migration from 3 to 4. And it's going to inherit from the class migration. And here we have to specify the version, of course. So the version will be from the version 3 to version 4. And we have to implement the members. So the members will be as follow. So inside this migrate, we need to put a pure SQL statement to create that specific data table. So I'm not going to enter in detail how to do it. So this is a pure SQL statement, how to create the data table. So now what we have to do next, we need to go to the DI or the app module, because here we need to add the migration. So here, before calling fallback to the struct migration, I'm going to add here a dot, of course, and here I'm going to add a function add migration, and I will add the migration that I have just created right now. It's a migration from 3 to 4. And of course, in the database, we have already increased from 3 to 4. So this is how to, if you want to add a new data table to your database. So first of all, I'm going to recap, create a new class or an object, create an object. It's going to inherit from migration from 3 to 4, specifying that specific migration from the version 3 to 4. And here you have to put the exact pure SQL statement to create a table. So our table will have an integer auto increment not null with a product ID and a product title. The ID is integer not null and the product title text not null. And in your dependency injection, if you are using any, do here or you are creating manually your instances of database, before doing build, add this migration from 3 to 4. And if you have another migrations, you just have to do it manually. So this is what we call manual migration. So let's run the application and see what is going to happen. And we have the data and there is nothing wrong. Application is still running perfectly fine. I'm going to recap. So if you want to, for example, run a migration by, let's say you have to rename a field, or to, first of all, you add a field, simply add the field inside your desired entity and go to the database version and increment the database version. The second use case, if you want to rename, for example, a field, you have to create a migration class and add in the migration spec. In our case, we want to rename the field. So the table name followed by the from the previous column name and the future or the next column name. So in our case, this is the next column name. And you increment the version and add it to the auto migrations. Great. The last use case, which is basically, let's say you want to add a new entity to your data table or new database. So create that entity and go to the create an object. And this object is going to create manually with a pure SQL statement your database, your data table. And in your dependency injection, or you are doing it manually, just don't forget to add migrations inside your add migration method, then call build. So this is basically the common use cases that you're going to see in your future projects. And the next tutorial, which is the last part, we're going to talk about basically how to use or how to handle the custom data, or to save data and retrieve custom data from with Roam database. And I hope I was helpful in this tutorial and hope you liked it, and see you in the next one. Have a good day and bye-bye.